After the surprising new discoveries concerning the ancient Greek roots of the Irish and the Scots, we have now the tribe of Dan that, of course, populated these areas. The tribe of Dan, or the Danites, are the Danes of Denmark as well, and of course the Irish. Let's go to the Celtic evidence. We see the ancient Celtic coinage that has been found. This gold coin is just one example of the many, but this is obviously a striking profile. Everybody knows this profile. It's Alexander the Great. And here he's wearing the ram's horns, the prize that was given to him by the high priests of Egypt. First, he went to, after he unified the Greek kingdoms into one coalition of Greeks, the Hellenes. He went to visit the temple in Jerusalem, where the high priests there told him that the prophet Daniel had prophesied about his becoming king and in 10 years taking over and squashing and terminating the kingdom of the Persians. And that's exactly what he did. And after he visited the temple in Jerusalem, where the high priest gave him the prophecy by the prophet Daniel, that the Greek nation, the Greek king, would terminate Darius's kingdom from the Persian Empire, he went to Egypt, where he asked the high priests there, am I a pharaoh? Am I a god, son of God, a pharaoh? And the high priest there told him, yes, you are. And they gave him this type of headwear to wear, which had ram's horns on the sides. And that is what we see on the profile of his coins. We know that is exactly Alexander the Great, who is wearing that Egyptian headdress. And of course, we know that he was biologically the son of one of the last pharaohs of Egypt, the last lineage of pharaohs of Egypt, King Nectanebo, who had fled Egypt and went to Salonika, Thessaloniki, northern Greece, where he stayed at the palace of Alexander the Great's father, Philip II of Macedon. Of course, Philip II was away quite often on skirmishes and battles away from his area. And Nectanebo, the pharaoh of Egypt, who had run off to save his life and self-exiled himself to Philip II area in Thessalonica, was very close to Alexander's mother, Olympias. And that's why Olympias, after becoming pregnant, kept on telling Philip II Macedonia that her son, Alexander, she would give birth to a son, and that he would be the son of a god. Because Pharaoh considered himself a god, he would quietly drug Olympias and then, all right, have fun with her, have his way with her anyway. Olympias then gave birth to Alexander. That's why Philip always claimed that Alexander was never his son. He was always away. He couldn't understand how his wife became pregnant. But that's another story for another video. Now we have the Celtic coinage, minted by the Celts from the late 4th century BC to the late 1st century BC. These Celtic coins were influenced by the trade with and supply of mercenaries to the Greeks, and initially copied Greek designs, especially Macedonian coins, as we said, from the time of Philip II of Macedon and his son, Alexander the Great. So this is the way Greek motifs ended up, and even Greek letters are found on various Celtic coins, especially those of southern France. Now let's go into the fact that we have the tribe of Dan the evidence found of the tribe of Dan being in these northern locations of Europe. And we said before in the previous videos on Scotland and Ireland, the tribe of Dan was populating the Peloponnese. And we have evidence of that from the book of the Maccabees in the Old Testament, where the Maccabees needed the help of the Spartans, and the Spartans so they have allies with the Spartans, and once they had that, nobody would touch a hair on the head of the Maccabees. Besides the fact that, of course, Maccabees and their strong faith put all their trust in God, and that's why they won and took over the temple site in only 3 years. Hence Hanukkah, the Feast of the Lights. That's another story we'll go into. But yes, the Spartans sent a letter to the Maccabees saying that they had parchment, a document in their hands, stating that they were children of Abraham, that Abraham was one of their ancestors, and they were the children of Abraham, just like the Maccabees were. And they sent a letter back to the Maccabees saying, whatever is ours is yours, and whatever is yours is ours, and that they would be brethren in blood, and even though they were far away. So we have the tribe of Dan in the Peloponnese, and spreading throughout Europe, and especially through trade and shipping. They would bring the Mediterranean produce and items such as lemons, citrus fruits, marble, ceramic ware, ceramic items, olives, olive oil, wine, and things of the sort that come from the Mediterranean area, figs, dates, things like that, and they would trade it for tin for everyday utensils and other things. Now, with Scotland and Ireland. So the tribe of Dan ended up being there, living there, additionally from trade, and of course, they populated these areas. The patriarch Dan was born from the handmaid of Rachel, Bilhah. Rachel was in envy of her sister Laban. She wanted so badly to, not her sister was Leah actually, they were of course the daughters of Laban. She wanted so badly to bear a child for Jacob that she gave him her handmaiden to bear a son, and that son was Dan. Dan in Hebrew meaning judge. When he was born, she said, quote, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son, therefore called she his name Dan, end quote. This is from Genesis 30, verse 6. This is the meaning of the word Dan, meaning strong or judge. There is also the saying that the mothers of the Spartan warriors would say to them before they left for war. They would say, come carrying your shield, or you come lying on it. In other words, don't you dare come back unless you're dead, as a hero. Or you come carrying your shield. And the Greek saying is, I dan, I epitas. In other words, you come as a dan, as a judge, carrying your shield, or you come lying on it. Okay? I dan, I epitas. Dan, meaning, of course, judge. Dan. D-A-N. Now, in Jacob's prophecy for the latter days, as we read in Genesis 49:1, Dan was prophesied to judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel in verse 16. It's an interesting characterization of Dan. The pulpit commentary says, with a play upon his name, the firstborn son of Rachel's handmaid, Bilhah, is described as one who should occupy an important place and exercise highly beneficial functions in the future Commonwealth, enjoying independence and self-government as one of the tribes of Israel, herder and others, and performing the office of an administrator among the people, not of his own tribe merely, but also of all Israel, emphasis added. End quote. Dan was to be a judge in the other tribes of Israel, yet still be his own separate nation. Jacob continues, quote, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards, end quote. Verse 17. The meaning of this prophecy is that he would leave a trail wherever he would go. The evidence of this is clear. Dan's migrations, as revealed in the Bible, show them naming everything after his father Dan. You can see Joshua 19 verse 47, Judges 18 verse 12. Dan had but one son, only one son, Hushim. This is recorded in Genesis 46:26. Quote, "These are the sons of Dan after their families. Of Shuham, the family of the Shuhamites. These are the families of Dan after their families." Quote, "All the families of the Shuhamites, according to those that were numbered of them, were 304,400. This is in Numbers 26:43. However, though this family no doubt branched into several smaller families, which are not named here, simply because this list contains only the leading families into which the tribes were divided. We see evidence of this in the Bible, like, quote, "Aholiab, the son of Ahishamach," end quote. This is in Exodus 31:6. Shelothmith, the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan, Leviticus 24:11. Ahiezer, the son of Ammishaddai, Numbers 1:12. Amiel, the son of Gemili, Numbers 13:12. And it goes on. There were smaller families of Dan via Shuham, Hushim. So the sub-tribes of Dan are Shuham, Ahisamach, Dibri, Ammishaddai, Gemali, Gogli, Jeroham. Now, the Promised Land. When the 12 tribes of Israel actually took possession of the Promised Land, the tribe of Dan was allotted its tribal inheritance in the southwestern area of the land. Dan was situated west-northwest of Judah. Dan's territory extended westward towards the Mediterranean Sea and included the busy port of Joppa. Next to modern-day Tel Aviv, this is recorded in Joshua 19:40-48. Now the Danites migrated northwards to Laish and called that city Dan after their father. We see that in Judges 18. The northern city Laish is now called Dan by the tribe of Dan. It was about 30 miles inland from the ancient busy port of Tyre. Thus, the ancient Danites must have had frequent contracts with people of Tyre, which is in fact occupied by their brethren, the tribe of Asher. So, since their Israelite brothers occupied the land of Tyre, they had access to Tyre at any time. These people of Tyre were people of sea trade and navigation, as recorded in Ezekiel 27. These people built Tyre and Sidon and the Lebanese coast. In the 1200 BC, before Dan went to Laish, in a song commemorating the great Israelite victory, the judge Deborah lamented that during the battle, the, quote, men of Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan River and asked why Dan remained in ships, end quote. Judges 5:17. The Danites were so preoccupied with the sea and sea trade that they chose to remain in their ships and help their brethren. So even before the time they went to Laish, the Danites were already engaged in seafaring activities off of Joppa. Where were these Danites sailing to, by the way? In Egypt, many of the Israelites, the royal line of Zara, Judah, Kalhot, and Darda, left Egypt and sailed into Greece. This is in 1 Chronicles 2 and verse 6. The Danites knew that these Israelites were dwelling in Greece, and therefore were in ample evidence that the Danites headed towards Greece as well. The historian C.W. Muller noted that, quote, Hecatius of Abdur, Greek historian, 4th century BC, tells us that the Egyptians, formerly being troubled by calamities, we can refer that to the 10 Commandments at the time of the Exodus, in order that the divine wrath might be averted, expelled all the Israelite aliens gathered together in Egypt. Of these, some under their leaders Danaus and Cadmus. Danus and Cadmus migrated into Greece, others into other regions, and greater part into Syria, Canaan. Their leader is said to have been Moses, a man renowned for wisdom and courage, as we know, founder and legislator of the state. A book entitled Helleno-Semitica, meaning Greek Semitic, of 1965, goes to great lengths to show that the Greeks, or the Hellenes, and the Israelites, the Semites, were closely related. Yes, this book mentions two branches of the Danites, Danuanians and Danans, and shows that these people once occupied the island of Cyprus. Okay? So, it was in Joppa that we had the tribe of Dan. Just across from that is the island of Cyprus. And from there on, of course, the Greek area, Greek islands in Greece. So the Danites occupied the island of Cyprus. It's also mentioned that Cyprus, the Cyprian tradition of the Danaan migration from the Eastern Mediterranean, that was the very same area which was assigned to the tribe of Dan when Joshua led the 12 tribes of Israel into the Promised Land. Professor Alan H. Jones wrote Bronze Age Civilization, the Philistines and the Danites, Philistines being, of course, Greeks from Crete. He traced the Danans, a name that the famed Greek poet Homer often used for all Greeks, Dans, as we said before, Idan, Iepitas, the Greek, come on it, or come holding it. And we know the adage, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Well, it was the Danites that gave the wooden horse to the Trojans, and that was the end of the Trojan civilization. The cunningness of the Danites, okay, that's the Greek wording is actually Dans, not Greeks, it's Dans. So, the area of Mycene and the area around Argos were all of the tribe of Danite, as we know the whole Peloponnese. So, one other thing that we have to know about, the ancient Olympic Games of ancient Greece, which would take place every 4 years, and were very important games. So important that if Greek kingdoms were having battles with each other, wars with each other, they would have to stop the war in order for Olympic games to take place. Now, the fact is that you could not take part in these Olympic Games unless you had a genealogy register. Who were your ancestors? And we know that from the ancient Israelites as well. Every one of them, every male and every family had a genealogy register. Who were their ancestors? They had to know where they came from and recite it. Well, the same thing with the ancient Greeks, especially those who wanted to take part in the Olympic Games. They could not do that unless they showed their genealogy had roots from Argos, meaning the tribe of Dan. Otherwise, you could not take part in the Olympic Games. You were considered a barbarian, a foreigner. Also the Spartans. The Spartans were Hebrews. At the time of the Battle of Marathon, 490 BC, they could not join the Athenians because of the fact that they had Rosh Hashanah in the month of September. Those 3 weeks, their holiest religious feast and period of the year, the beginning of the year, where they would blow the trumpets and shout the name of God. And they could not join the Athenians against the Persians because they had Rosh Hashanah. So they went up to Athens 2 days after their Rosh Hashanah feast was finished. It was 2 days after the Battle of Marathon took place and the Athenians won over the Persians. Yes, the tribe of Dan, the area of Argos, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Spartans were Hebrews, and they knew it. They had the papyrus, the documents written. It was their evidence that was their genealogy. They knew where they came from. They were brothers with the Maccabees, That's also recorded in the book of Maccabees in the Old Testament. Fascinating stuff that we are not told in school, but we have to know it because a lot of us have these roots and we don't know it. Now, the book entitled Helleno-Semitica, written in 1965, goes in great lengths proving the Greeks, the Hellenes, and the Israelites, the Semites, were closely related. The book mentions two branches of the Danites, Danunians and the Danans, people occupying the island of Cyprus, as we said, trading, the Danan migration from the Mediterranean. And that was the very same area which was assigned to the tribes of Dan during the time of Joshua. The mighty Hercules. Hercules was born in Thebes, we know. The legend of Hercules has been told from ancient times till our day, today, and many have not made the connection between Hercules and Samson. Amazing stuff. Hercules and Samson. Now, okay, you may have had enough of this. I think we have to go on to another video having to do with the rest of this article. This is part 1. Part 2 follows. Please subscribe and tell me what you think. Thank you.